The air in Asgard was thick with the scent of pine and the faint tang of iron, a reminder of the forge fires that never ceased to burn. The realm of the Aesir was a place of towering spires and golden halls, where the gods walked with the confidence of those who believed themselves eternal. But even here, in the heart of their power, there was a whisper of unease, a shadow that lingered at the edges of their vision. Odin, the All-Father, stood at the edge of the Bifrost, the rainbow bridge that connected Asgard to the other realms. His one eye, sharp and piercing, scanned the horizon as if searching for something only he could see. His ravens, Hugin and Munin, perched on his shoulders, their dark feathers glinting in the light of the setting sun. They whispered secrets into his ears, but today their words brought no comfort. "The giants grow bolder," Odin muttered, his voice low and gravelly. "Their attacks grow more frequent, their numbers greater. We cannot hold them off forever." Behind him, Loki leaned against the bridge's railing, his expression unreadable. The trickster god was a study in contrasts, his sharp features and sly smile masking a mind that was always working, always scheming. "Perhaps," he said, his tone light but his eyes sharp, "you should consider a different approach. Brute strength alone will not win this war." Odin turned to face him, his gaze narrowing. "And what would you suggest, brother? Diplomacy? The giants do not understand the language of peace." Loki shrugged, a careless gesture that belied the weight of his words. "There are other forms of power. Knowledge, for one. Wisdom, the kind that can turn the tide of a battle before it even begins." Odin's eye gleamed with interest, though he said nothing. He had heard whispers of such a thing, a spring hidden deep within the roots of Yggdrasil, the World Tree. A place where the waters of wisdom flowed, guarded by a being as ancient as the cosmos itself. "Mimir's spring," Odin said at last, his voice barely above a whisper. Loki's smile widened, though there was something unsettling about it. "Precisely. But be warned, brother. The price for such knowledge is high. Are you willing to pay it?" Odin did not answer, but the look in his eye said everything. He was a god of ambition, of relentless drive. If there was a way to secure Asgard's future, he would find it, no matter the cost. The journey to the roots of Yggdrasil was long and treacherous. The World Tree was a vast, sprawling entity, its branches reaching into the heavens and its roots delving deep into the earth. Odin traveled alone, his ravens flying ahead to scout the path. The air grew colder the deeper he went, the light dimming until it was little more than a faint glow. At last he reached the spring. It was a small, unassuming pool of water, its surface still and dark. But there was a power here, a presence, that made the hair on the back of Odin's neck stand on end. "You seek wisdom." The voice came from the shadows, deep and resonant. A figure emerged, tall and imposing, with eyes that glowed like embers. Mimir, the guardian of the spring. "I do," Odin said, his voice steady despite the unease that coiled in his gut. Mimir studied him for a long moment, his gaze piercing. "The waters of wisdom are not freely given. To drink from this spring you must offer something in return, something of great value." Odin's jaw tightened. "Name your price." Mimir's lips curved into a faint smile, an eye. "Your sight in exchange for knowledge." The words hung in the air, heavy and final. Odin felt a flicker of doubt, a rare moment of hesitation. To lose an eye was no small thing, even for a god. But then he thought of Asgard, of the giants at their gates, of the future he was fighting to protect. "Very well," he said at last, his voice firm. Mimir nodded, his expression unreadable. "Then let it be done." The pain was sharp and immediate, a searing agony that made Odin grit his teeth. He felt the weight of his eye in his hand, warm and wet, before he dropped it into the spring. The waters rippled, then stilled, and for a moment there was only silence. Then the knowledge came, flooding his mind like a tidal wave. He saw the threads of fate, the intricate web of cause and effect that bound the 9 realms together. He saw the giants' plans, their weaknesses, their strengths. He saw the future, not as a single path, but as a myriad of possibilities, each one shaped by the choices he would make. When he opened his eye, his one remaining eye, the world looked different. Sharper, clearer, as if he were seeing it for the first time. "You have what you sought," Mimir said, his voice echoing in the stillness. "But remember, All-Father, knowledge is a double-edged sword. Wield it wisely." Odin nodded, though his mind was already racing with plans, with strategies. He turned and began the journey back to Asgard, his ravens flying ahead to herald his return. But as he walked, a thought nagged at the back of his mind, a whisper of doubt that he could not quite silence. What if I had chosen differently? The return to Asgard was a blur of cold winds and fleeting shadows. Odin's ravens, Hugin and Munin, flew ahead, their calls echoing through the vast expanse of Yggdrasil's roots. The All-Father's steps were heavy, his mind still reeling from the flood of knowledge that now coursed through him. The world looked different, sharper, clearer, but it also felt heavier, as if the weight of the cosmos now rested on his shoulders. As he crossed the Bifrost, the rainbow bridge shimmering beneath his feet, Odin's thoughts turned to the giants. He saw their movements now, not as random acts of aggression, but as part of a larger, more sinister plan. The giants were not merely attacking Asgard, they were testing its defenses, probing for weaknesses. And without the wisdom of the spring, Odin would have been blind to their schemes, but even as he formulated a plan to counter their advances, a nagging doubt lingered in the back of his mind. What if I had chosen differently? The question was like a splinter, impossible to ignore. When Odin returned to the golden halls of Asgard, the gods greeted him with a mixture of relief and curiosity. His absence had not gone unnoticed, and the tension in the realm was palpable. "All-Father," Thor said, stepping forward. His hammer Mjolnir hung at his side, its power a constant reminder of his strength. "We were beginning to wonder if you had abandoned us." Odin's gaze swept over the assembled gods, his one eye piercing. "I have not abandoned you," he said, his voice firm, "but the giants grow bolder and we must act swiftly if we are to protect Asgard." Loki, who had been leaning against a pillar, smirked. "And what wisdom have you brought back from your journey, brother? Or was it all for naught?" Odin's eye narrowed, but he said nothing. He could feel Loki's gaze on him, sharp and calculating, as if the trickster god were trying to unravel the secrets he now carried. The days that followed were a whirlwind of activity. Odin's newfound wisdom allowed him to anticipate the giants' movements, and he devised a series of strategies to counter their attacks. The gods rallied behind him, their confidence bolstered by his decisive leadership, but not everyone was convinced. "You've changed," Frigg, Odin's wife, said one evening as they stood together in the gardens of Asgard. Her voice was soft, but there was an edge to it that Odin could not ignore. "I have done what was necessary," Odin replied, his tone guarded. Frigg studied him, her eyes searching his face. "And what of the cost? What have you sacrificed to gain this wisdom?" Odin hesitated, his hand instinctively moving to the empty socket where his eye had been. "A small price to pay for the safety of Asgard," he said at last. But Frigg was not so easily placated. "And what of the future? What of the choices you have yet to make? Wisdom is not without its burdens, Odin. Do not let it consume you." Her words lingered in the air, a quiet warning that Odin could not shake. As the weeks passed, the tension between Odin and Loki grew. The trickster god had always been unpredictable, but now there was a new edge to his behavior, a restlessness that Odin could not ignore. "You keep secrets from us, brother," Loki said one evening as they stood together on the ramparts of Asgard. The stars above were bright, their light reflecting in Loki's sharp eyes. "I keep what is necessary," Odin replied, his voice cold. Loki's smile was thin, almost mocking. "And yet, you expect our loyalty. Tell me, All-Father, do you truly believe you can protect Asgard alone?" Odin's jaw tightened. "I do not need your approval, Loki. I need your obedience." For a moment, the two gods stood in silence, the air between them thick with unspoken words. Then Loki turned and walked away, his laughter echoing in the night. The turning point came during a council meeting. The gods had gathered to discuss the latest reports from the borders of Asgard, where the giants had launched a series of coordinated attacks. "We must strike back," Thor said, his voice booming. "Show them the strength of the Aesir." Odin shook his head. "No, The giants expect us to retaliate. We must be smarter, more cunning. And what would you suggest? Loki asked, his tone dripping with sarcasm. More wisdom from your precious spring? Odin's eye flashed with anger, but he kept his voice steady. We will use their arrogance against them. We will lure them into a trap, and when they are at their weakest, we will strike. The gods murmured their approval, but Loki's expression remained unreadable. The plan was set into motion. Odin's strategies were flawless, his knowledge of the giants' movements allowing the Aesir to outmaneuver them at every turn. The tide of the war began to turn, and for the first time in months, there was hope in Asgard. But as the battles raged on, Odin began to notice something strange. The giants' attacks were becoming more coordinated, more precise, as if they too had gained new insight. They know our plans, Odin muttered one evening as he studied the maps spread out before him. But how? The answer came in the form of a whisper, carried on the wind by his ravens. Loki. The confrontation was inevitable. Odin found Loki in the gardens, his back turned as he gazed out over the realm. You betrayed us, Odin said, his voice low and dangerous. Loki turned, his expression calm. I did what was necessary. You sided with the giants, Odin accused, his hand tightening around the shaft of his spear. Loki's smile was bitter. And you sacrificed your eye for wisdom. Tell me, brother, which of us is the greater? Fool? For a moment, Odin was silent. Then he stepped forward, his eye blazing with fury. You have doomed us all. Loki's laughter echoed through the gardens, sharp and mocking. No, Odin, you doomed us the moment you drank from that spring. You traded your sight for knowledge, but you failed to see the truth. And what truth is that? Odin demanded. Loki's smile faded, replaced by a look of cold determination. That wisdom is not enough, not when the cost is so high. The gardens of Asgard were silent, save for the faint rustle of leaves in the wind. Odin and Loki stood facing each other, the air between them crackling with tension. The golden light of the realm seemed to dim, as if even the heavens held their breath. You betrayed us, Odin repeated, his voice low and dangerous. His grip on his spear, Gungnir, tightened, the weapon's runes glowing faintly. Loki's expression was calm, almost serene, but his eyes burned with a cold fire. I did what was necessary, he said again, his tone steady. You were blind, Odin, blind to the truth. I merely opened your eyes. By siding with the giants? Odin's voice rose, his anger breaking through. By putting Asgard at risk? Loki's smile was bitter. Asgard was already at risk. Your wisdom, your precious knowledge, it was a crutch. You relied on it too heavily, and in doing so, you weakened us all. Odin took a step forward, his eye blazing. You speak of weakness, yet you conspired with our enemies. You are the one who has weakened us, Loki. You are the one who has betrayed us. For a moment, Loki said nothing. Then he laughed, a sharp, mocking sound that echoed through the gardens. Betrayal? No, brother. I merely sought to show you the truth. The truth that wisdom alone is not enough. That sacrifice alone is not enough. You traded your eye for knowledge, but what have you truly gained? Odin's jaw tightened, but he said nothing. Loki's smile faded, replaced by a look of cold determination. How you think you can protect Asgard with your plans and strategies, but you forget one thing, Odin. The giants are not the only threat. The real danger lies within. The words lingered in the air, a quiet warning that Odin could not ignore. But before he could respond, a horn sounded in the distance, a deep, resonant note that sent a shiver through the realm. The giants, Odin muttered, his eye narrowing. They're attacking. Loki's smile returned, thin and mocking. It seems your plans have failed, brother. The giants are at the gates, and Asgard stands on the brink of destruction. Odin turned and strode toward the gates, his mind racing. The giants' attacks had grown more coordinated, more precise, as if they knew the Aesir's every move. And now, with Loki's betrayal, the situation had grown even more dire. The battle that followed was fierce and unrelenting. The giants, led by their king, Thrym, surged toward the gates of Asgard, their weapons gleaming in the dim light. The Aesir fought valiantly, their strength and skill unmatched, but the giants' numbers were overwhelming. Odin stood at the forefront of the battle, his spear flashing as he struck down giant after giant. His ravens, Hugin and Munin, circled above, their cries echoing through the chaos. But even as he fought, Odin's mind was elsewhere. What if I had chosen differently? The question haunted him, a whisper in the back of his mind that he could not silence. He had sacrificed his eye for wisdom, but now as Asgard teetered on the brink of destruction, he wondered if it had been worth it. As the battle raged on, Odin noticed something strange. The giants' attacks were not random, they were focused, precise, as if they were following a plan. And then he saw it. Loki standing among the giants, his eyes gleaming with a cold light. "Loki!" Odin shouted, his voice cutting through the chaos. "What have you done?" Loki turned, his smile widening. "What was necessary, brother? I have shown you the truth. Now it is up to you to decide what to do with it." Odin's eye narrowed, his anger boiling over. He raised his spear, the runes glowing brighter, and charged toward Loki. The two gods clashed, their weapons sparking as they met. The battle between them was fierce, each strike fueled by anger and betrayal. Odin's strength was unmatched, but Loki's cunning and agility made him a formidable opponent. The two gods fought with a ferocity that shook the very foundations of Asgard. Finally, Odin gained the upper hand. With a powerful strike, he disarmed Loki, sending the trickster god sprawling to the ground. "You have betrayed us," Odin said, his voice low and dangerous. "You have betrayed me." Loki looked up, his expression calm despite the situation. "And yet, you still do not see the truth." "What truth?" Odin demanded, his spear poised to strike. Loki's smile was bitter. "That wisdom is not enough. That sacrifice is not enough. You traded your eye for knowledge, but you failed to see the bigger picture. The giants are not the only threat, Odin. The real danger lies within." For a moment, Odin was silent. Then he lowered his spear, his eye narrowing. "What are you saying, Loki?" Loki's smile faded, replaced by a look of cold determination. "I am saying that the giants are merely a symptom of a larger problem. The real threat is the imbalance in the cosmos, an imbalance that you created when you drank from the spring of wisdom." Odin's jaw tightened, but he said nothing. Loki continued, his voice steady. "By drinking from the spring, you disrupted the balance of the cosmos. The giants' attacks, the chaos spreading across the 9 realms, it is all a result of your actions." For a moment, Odin was silent. Then he turned and strode away, his mind racing. The air in Asgard was thick with the scent of smoke and blood, the aftermath of the battle still lingering like a shadow. The giants had been driven back, their forces scattered, but the cost had been high. The golden halls of Asgard bore the scars of the conflict, their once pristine walls now marred by cracks and scorch marks. Odin stood at the edge of the Bifrost, his one eye scanning the horizon. The weight of the cosmos pressed down on him, a burden he could not shake. The words of Loki echoed in his mind, a haunting reminder of the choices he had made. The real danger lies within. The Allfather turned and strode toward the roots of Yggdrasil, his steps heavy with purpose. The journey was long and treacherous, the path winding through the dark and twisted roots of the World Tree. But Odin did not falter. He had made his decision. When he reached the Spring of Wisdom, Mimir was waiting for him. The guardian of the spring stood tall and imposing, his eyes glowing like embers in the dim light. "You have returned," Mimir said, his voice deep and resonant. "I have," Odin replied, his tone steady. "I have come to make amends." Mimir studied him for a long moment, his gaze piercing. "And what would you offer in return, Allfather? You have already sacrificed an eye. What more do you have to give?" Odin's jaw tightened, but he did not hesitate. "My life," he said, "if that is what it takes to restore the balance." For a moment, Mimir was silent. Then he nodded, his expression unreadable. "Very well. But know this, Odin. The path you have chosen is fraught with peril. The balance of the cosmos is a delicate thing, and even the smallest misstep could have dire consequences." Odin nodded, his resolve unwavering. "I understand." The ritual was swift and brutal. Odin knelt before the spring, his head bowed in submission. Mimir raised his hand and the waters of the spring began to churn, their surface rippling with an otherworldly light. "By the power of the spring of wisdom," Mimir intoned, his voice echoing through the darkness, "I restore the balance of the cosmos, but the price must be paid." Odin felt a searing pain in his chest, a burning agony that made him grit his teeth. He felt his life force ebbing away, his strength fading with each passing moment. But he did not resist. He had made his choice. As the ritual reached its climax, the waters of the spring surged forward, enveloping Odin in a blinding light. He felt a surge of power, a wave of energy that coursed through his veins. The balance of the cosmos was restored, the chaos that had plagued the 9 realms dissipating like smoke in the wind. When the light faded, Odin was alone. Mimir was gone, the spring silent and still. The Allfather rose to his feet, his body weak but his spirit unbroken. He had paid the price, but the cost had been high. As he made his way back to Asgard, Odin's thoughts turned to the future. The giants had been defeated, their threat neutralized, but the scars of the conflict remained. The gods had been tested, their loyalty and strength pushed to the limit. And Odin himself had been changed, his wisdom tempered by the weight of his choices. When he returned to the golden halls of Asgard, the gods greeted him with a mixture of relief and awe. The balance of the cosmos had been restored, and the realm was at peace once more. "Allfather," Thor said, stepping forward. His hammer, Mjolnir, hung at his side, its power a constant reminder of his strength. "You have saved us." Odin shook his head, his expression grim. "I have merely done what was necessary. The true test lies ahead." The gods murmured their agreement, their confidence bolstered by Odin's words. But the Allfather's thoughts were elsewhere. In the days that followed, Odin worked tirelessly to rebuild Asgard. The scars of the conflict were slowly healed, the golden halls restored to their former glory. But the Allfather's mind was never far from the spring of wisdom, the weight of his choices, a constant reminder of the cost of wisdom. As he stood at the edge of the Bifrost, his one eye scanning the horizon, Odin felt a sense of peace. The balance of the cosmos had been restored, and the future was secure. But the question lingered, a shadow in the back of his mind, a question that would haunt him for the rest of his days.